I think it's becoming a new class, and I think it's very important for those on the left, politically, to see it as an emerging class. And only if we see the precariat in class terms will we learn to understand the consciousness that is relevant for the precariat, and then begin to articulate a new vocabulary of the left, a new set of images on the left, and an agenda for the precariat seen through the eyes of the precariat. And I think that that is the most important point of historical transition in political dynamics that we're facing at the moment. I think one must begin by understanding the historical context. This is a crisis moment for neoliberalism. And neoliberalism has been pursuing a commodification of life, an individualization of life, and has allowed deliberately a growth of insecurity, inequalities, and this is becoming unsustainable. That is the context. And in that context, the precariat is facing a set of pressures which define the potential for a radical transformation of our societies. It's not the old socialist challenge of the early parts of the 20th century. It is a new challenge. And I think one must understand politically, and I would say this to Podemos and any other new political grouping in Spain, that you must understand the characteristics of the precariat profoundly in order to define the political possibilities of the moment. And in that regard, I think the key point is that you have millions and millions of people in Spain and all over the world who are facing not just a life of unstable living and unstable labor, but without a sense of future, without a sense of occupational narrative to give to their lives. And this goes together with the fact that this is the first working class in history whose level of education is greater than the level of labor they're expected to perform. Now, it's in that context that I've tried to develop a manifesto, if you like, of 29 policies which, taken together, would amount to a revival of the great trinity of equality, liberty, and solidarity. Because all of those have been sacrificed by the neoliberal political consensus, and to their eternal discredit, the old Social Democrats, the old Labour parties, have been complicit in that abdication of a progressive vision of society. So we are at a very interesting historical moment when the dynamics of global capitalism have created this precariat, which is becoming up to 40% or more of our populations, and yet there's a vacuum of political imagination in the center of our political systems. And that is why people have been disengaged, and why some people have been lured to the far right of neo-fascist populism. And I say to anybody who wants to go into progressive politics today that you must be brave. You must be courageous to challenge the orthodoxies and be prepared to use a language that may seem risky, but you've got to address the crisis and see it as a breakdown of the old distribution system. The old system which gave profits a share of the national income and labour a share of the national income. That's gone, and it won't come back. And new progressive politicians and political movements have got to start from that context. I think I think this is going to be a fundamental question in politics. I've been advocating a basic universal income for 30 years. And we have just done pilots in India, of all places. And we found that giving everybody a universal basic income unconditionally led to people doing more work, not less, being more productive, not less, improving nutrition for the children, improving schooling, attendance and health, many other positive respects. I have been worried when I heard that Podemos is retreating from supporting a basic income, and I would say to them in all friendliness, in all fraternity, if you like, that they should reconsider that. If they went for a minimum income scheme targeted at the poorest, they will only fall into the contradictions that the neoliberal agenda has fallen into over the last 30 years, because that will inevitably lead to a promotion of workfare. What do I mean? If you have a minimum income scheme targeted only to the poorest, you have to ask two questions. Should we give it to someone who chooses to be poor, or who is poor because we think it's his or her own fault? Then immediately the state says we must put conditions. They must do this, they must do that, they must do that. You create further problems. Imagine what happens. I say you are poor, and I've decided that you are not poor from your own fault. Okay, I give you a minimum income. And then there are low-wage jobs around the corner. So if you go from a small benefit to a low-wage job, and you're in the precariat, you will be facing a marginal tax rate of 80% or more. It means your precariat will be facing a tax rate that's twice what the middle class are being asked to pay. This is a regressive, inegalitarian policy. It's ridiculous. But it's made even worse because of what I describe in the book as precarity traps. Because when you lose a job, do you think you get your benefits tomorrow morning? No, you don't. Many people, it turns out, have to wait for weeks, for months, before they actually start receiving their benefits, right? Now suppose you have just started receiving your benefit, and along comes an employment office official and says there's a part-time temporary job the other side of Madrid. You must take it. Do you think it would be rational for anybody to take such a job? Because very quickly they would be losing it again and have to go back to the beginning of the queue to start trying to apply for benefits. Now, you cannot get more idiotic and regressive than that. It doesn't make any sort of sense seen from the perspective of the precariat. And what you get drawn to at that point is dualistic vocabulary that I criticize in the book. You start saying, oh, so-and-so is lazy, or is a scrounger, as we call it in English. And then the rhetoric is drawn to the right. And that is a complete failure. It's much better to have a universal basic income, because having a universal basic income actually increases the incentive to work and to labor, because you're not facing that poverty trap. And moreover, it's more ethical, and it's more needed because we need a redistribution of income, and there are no other ways of redistributing income that either Podemos or any other party has proposed that makes any sort of sense. I think a basic income would help in giving people more control over their time, a sense that they can make decisions without disastrous consequences. It would also help legitimize forms of work, including care work that's done mostly by women, and allow all of us, men to make choices in how we allocate our time. It's not a panacea, but it helps in that direction. And I think it's very important that we reconceptualize what it is we mean by work, not only for feminist reasons, but also because everybody in the precariat has to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, be demoralized in doing a lot of work that is not recognized, is not remunerated, is not in our statistics, is not recognized as work, but you have to do it. Retraining, more retraining, networking, applying for jobs, waiting around, all these sort of things. You think they're leisure? Of course they're not. They're work. And I think it's very important that we have not only a reconceptualizing of work, of what we mean by work, but to translate that into a demand that our social and labor statistics that are reproduced in newspapers, in the media, in textbooks and everything, be fundamentally transformed, overhauled, so that all forms of work are recognized out there, because only by changing what we have in our statistics will you change the mindset of policymakers, social scientists and activists, and what people are having to do in their lives. And that is a very important part in beginning to understand the realities that the precariat and all of us are facing today.
Thank you very much, guys.
Well,